Thanks for joining me again. Today's story is called A Taxing Time, the Boston Tea Party. Before we get into it, we're going to review what we learned about the other day. So let's get started. What are the names of the 3 English settlements in North America? Take a second and think about that. The 3 English settlements in North America were the Pilgrims in Plymouth, which was up in Massachusetts, well, what we know it now as Massachusetts. There was the Roanoke Island, or the Lost Colony, which was in our very own North Carolina, but closer to the coast. And there was Jamestown, which is in what we now know as Virginia. These were some of the first English settlements in North America. As time passed, more and more English settlers arrived in North America. All up and down the east coast of North America, they formed more colonies where they started new lives for themselves. What country did most of the people who lived in the colonies originally come from? Do you guys remember? That's right, Great Britain. How many different or separate colonies along the coast of North America did the British settle? 13. Okay. Who governed and controlled or ruled all of the colonies? It wasn't the people, it was the British King and the British Parliament. When the colonists needed more help to clear additional land for farming, what did they do? Do you guys remember? They brought people from Africa and made them work as enslaved people. Do you remember all the names of the 13 colonies? Let's see. All right, listen to find out about some of the problems the colonists encountered and to find out why colonists did something drastic when they had the Boston Tea Party. For a long time, many colonists were proud to be British citizens ruled by the King of Great Britain. But then things began to change. The King and the British Parliament had spent a lot of money helping to set up and protect the colonies. To help pay for these expenses, Parliament decided to make the colonies in America pay taxes to Great Britain. Taxes are extra money people pay when they buy certain things. For example, today we may pay taxes when we buy clothes at a department store, food in a restaurant, or gas for the car. Depending on the state where you live, you might have to pay $1 or $2 more for your new shirt than what is listed on the price tag, or a few extra cents for your sandwich than the price listed on the menu. But these stores don't get to keep the extra money. They must give the extra money or taxes to the government. These days, we vote and elect representatives or people to represent us in government. These people make decisions about how to best spend the taxes to provide public services that benefit all who live here. So, for those of you who knew, I am from the state of Maryland, okay? And back home, where my parents live still, they have what is called a bag tax. So if you've ever gone to the grocery store with your family to get groceries, or the toy store, or pretty much any store, when you buy your stuff, a lot of the time they give you a plastic bag to carry it all in, right? Well, up in Maryland, you have to pay 5 cents. So a nickel or 5 pennies, you have to pay an extra 5 cents to get that bag. That is called a bag tax. And the money, like our read aloud told us, it doesn't actually go to the stores. It goes to the government. And then the government, with the representatives in our government, they decide how best to use that money to help out everybody who lives there. Okay? The government uses the taxes to help pay for things that everybody needs, like schools, public transportation, like a bus or a metro, roads, water and garbage service, police and fire protection, and other public services. But back in the time when the colonies were first established, the people who lived in the colonies were not permitted to vote and elect representatives or people to represent them in British Parliament on the other side of the ocean. This room in this picture is one of the rooms in Great Britain in which the British Parliament meets. Okay, so that's where their rulers would meet and talk about the important things. Okay. So many people who lived in the American colonies in the 1700s felt that it was unfair for the British king to ask them to pay taxes. The colonists were asked to pay extra stamps. The colonists were asked to pay for extra stamps, sugar, and other things. Because the colonists could not voice their opinions to the British government through their representatives, they wondered, why should they have to pay taxes? It just didn't seem fair to them. Do you guys think that would be fair? Would you like it if you had to pay stuff and you didn't even get a voice? I know I wouldn't. All over the colonies, people grew more and more angry, but it was in the colony of Massachusetts that tempers flared the most. King George of Great Britain sent troops to try to keep the peace in Boston, but it did not help very much. The people in the colony of Massachusetts were really mad about paying those taxes, guys. Then, in 1773, the British Parliament did something that the colonists could not stand. They passed a law called the Tea Act and tried to force the colonists to buy tea from one British company only, charging a large tax for the tea. The colonists did not think it was fair to force them to pay more for tea, and they refused to pay taxes on tea, one of their favorite drinks. So here in America now, one of the favorite drinks might be coffee or Coca-Cola or Pepsi, okay? Back then, because they had all come from Britain, one of their favorite drinks was tea. I like tea. I think it's delicious before I go to bed. Anyway, they began sending shiploads of tea back to Britain and ordering tea from the Dutch Republic instead. The Dutch Republic was the name of the country we now know as the Netherlands. This made the king even angrier. He told them that they could not send any more tea back to Great Britain without paying the tax. Because of this, the colonists of Massachusetts revolted or rose up against the British king. They decided that they would not accept the king's decision. So, why do you think the colonists ordered tea from the Dutch Republic? Probably because they didn't want to have to pay that extra high tax that the king was putting on the British tea, right? Shiploads of British tea continued to enter the port of Boston, Massachusetts. A port is a place on the coast where ships load and unload their goods or their products. Okay. On a December night in 1773, a group of men known as the Sons of Liberty planned a most unusual tea party. If we're going to have a tea party, what might we do? We might set up a table, pour some tea, maybe put out some cream and some sugar. We might get all dressed up. Who knows, right? But we would get ready to drink it, right? Well, let's see what they do. Smearing their faces with soot, grease, and streaks of red paint, they stuck feathers in their hair, disguised as Mohawk Native Americans, a common symbol of freedom at the time. They made their way down to the harbor, or along the water of the coast. Climbing aboard the 3 British ships, they dumped 342 chests of valuable tea into the Boston harbor. This meant that the British lost tea and money. This event became known as the Boston Tea Party. So, what these people did, guys, is that they took all of the boxes of tea, right? They hadn't paid for it. This is the ship that had come from Great Britain. This is the ship that had come from Great Britain, and it had lots of boxes of all the tea that the king wanted the people in the colonies to buy with those extra high taxes, to buy so that the government in Britain would have more money to spend, right? But the colonists were like, we don't want to buy your tea because the taxes are too high, and we don't have a representative who's going to voice how we feel over in Great Britain. So why should we have to pay those taxes? So what they did was they snuck onto the ship late at night, probably in the middle of the night, dressed up as Mohawk Native Americans. And they took those boxes and they threw them overboard. If you throw boxes of tea overboard, are you going to be able to use them? Nope. They're wasting it, right? And remember, they didn't pay for it, so the king's not getting any money from it. So the king is losing all of his tea and all of his money. How do you think that king is going to feel? Let's find out. Furious, King George of Great Britain closed the port of Boston, one of the American colony's most important ports. Remember, a port is a place on the coast, so on the water, where the ships load and unload goods. Not just the British ships, but any other ships that might be bringing goods, okay? He told them that they would not receive any more goods from Britain until they paid for the tea that they had destroyed. With no supplies coming from Great Britain, there was nothing for the colonists to sell in their shops, so people had to close their shops. So, in this picture, you can see that this is a shop in Boston that was owned by owned by a man named Paul Revere, okay? You're going to hear more about Paul Revere in the next read aloud, okay? Many people lost their jobs. Food was scarce, meaning hard to find. Colonists from up and down the East Coast helped out, sending money and supplies to Massachusetts. So the other colonies, they were helping out, okay? They were being kind and trying to do all they could to help out Massachusetts because they also thought it wasn't fair that they had to pay those high taxes. What were the colonists to do? What should they say to the British king? The people of Boston began to talk of war against Great Britain and its king. But other colonists warned them not to act so quickly. Wait a bit, they suggested. It's never a good idea to fight back without cooling off a bit first. All 13 colonies decided to come up with a plan together. They held a big meeting in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, about midway between the farthest New England colonies and the farthest southern colonies. So, let's see. I'm going to go back just for a minute. So, they're meeting in Pennsylvania, right here. Well, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Okay. And this is about midway for all of these colonies and all of these colonies. All right, so these are your southern colonies, and these are your New England colonies. Ooh, one too far. There we go. Each colony elected representatives to attend the meeting. It wasn't possible for all of the colonists to attend the meeting, so each colony only sent a few people to speak for them, okay? It was the first time that representatives from all the colonies, except for Georgia, met together in one place. They called themselves the Continental Congress. Leaders in the colonies were divided. Some remained loyal or faithful to Great Britain and the king, and they were called the Loyalists. After all, they said, we're British too. Others were beginning to think of themselves not as British citizens, but as Americans. They wanted to rule themselves instead of being ruled by a faraway king. These people were called the Patriots. So we have two different groups of people. We have people who still think that they should follow the rule of the King of Great Britain, and those were called the Loyalists. And then there were people who wanted to rule themselves. They thought that they should rule themselves, and they were called the Patriots. Okay? So, members of the Continental Congress included George Washington. We know him. He was from Virginia, and he was a young army commander who had helped protect the colonies. Benjamin Franklin, who attended the second meeting of Continental Congress, a Philadelphian known for his ability to get people to work together. Though unable to attend, so he wasn't able to go, Thomas Jefferson was known as an excellent writer and was elected as a representative from Virginia. So we've got George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson. Okay. At that first Continental Congress, the representatives decided to approach the king in a friendly way. They sent him a letter telling him that they wanted to work things out peacefully. They asked the British Parliament to stop making laws or rules for them. We feel that we should create our own laws since we are not able to vote for laws in Parliament, they said. In the meantime, while they were waiting for an answer from the king, the colonists decided to stop selling goods to Great Britain and to stop buying goods from Great Britain. Okay, let's see. So, the representatives, remember, that were meeting for Continental Congress, so the representatives from all of the colonies, were meeting in a building in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Okay. At the end of the meeting, the colonists were still split in their opinions about what to do. The Loyalists hoped that the king would grant their request, letting them make their own laws while still remaining British. The Patriots kept stirring things up, talking of going to war and breaking away from Great Britain altogether. So the Loyalists and the Patriots, they still don't agree about what to do. Okay, the Loyalists were loyal to Great Britain and the King of Great Britain, and the Patriots wanted to make their own laws, and they did not want to obey the king anymore. Okay, so how do you think that meeting went? If there are some people who want one thing and another group of people that want another thing, do you think that it was very calm in there and that they were able to talk nicely and normally to each other? Probably not. Probably was not a calm time. All right, so that is the end of that one. I love that story. I love talking about the Boston Tea Party. So, here we go. These are your questions. What are taxes and what are they used for? Go ahead, pause the video, and tell somebody. Taxes are extra money paid for goods or things that you buy that the government is going to use to help pay for public services such as schools, police and fire protection, water and garbage services, etc. What is a representative? Someone elected to represent or speak for a larger group of people in the government. This helps the government decide what to spend the taxes on. Remember, the people in the 13 colonies did not have representatives in Great Britain, right? They did not have were not able to send representatives over across the ocean for to join the meetings where Great Britain talked about their rules. Why did the king and the British Parliament decide to tax the British colonies in America? Yeah, they wanted some money. So the British Parliament had, remember when the colonists first went over there, when the settlers went over there, they needed money, a lot of money, from the British Parliament to help set up and protect themselves as the colonies, right? How did the British colonists feel about being taxed? So how did those people in the British colonies, the 13 original colonies, how did they feel about being taxed by Great Britain? They were not happy about it, right? They were really angry about it. Why do you think they felt that way? Yep, because they did not have the representatives in Parliament. So they felt that if they didn't have somebody who was going to speak for them, that they shouldn't have to pay those taxes. What was the Boston Tea Party? That was when the colonists dumped tea into the Boston Harbor, and they ended up wasting all that tea, so the king lost a whole bunch of tea and a whole bunch of money. Not a happy king. What was the colonists' next plan for solving the problem with the British king? They had a meeting called the First Continental Congress, and they wrote a letter to the king asking him to please let them be their own people and rule themselves, right? Or to let them have representatives in Parliament. So, did the Boston Tea Party solve the problems of the tea being taxed? No, that did not fix their problem, did it? How do you know the problem wasn't solved? Yeah, the king was so mad that he closed the port so that no more supplies could come into Massachusetts. The colonists didn't have anything to sell in their stores, which led to even more problems for them. Did everyone agree on what should be done? Like, did everyone in the colonies agree on what should have been done? No. Some colonists were loyalists and wanted to remain loyal to the king, while others, the patriots, wanted to rule themselves. All right, now we're going to work on word work, okay? In my read aloud, you heard me say, King George told the colonists that they would not receive any more goods from Great Britain until they paid for the tea that they had destroyed. I want you to say the word goods with me. You can whisper it, monster talk it, mouse voice it, however you want. Goods, goods, goods. Goods are things that can be traded, bought, or sold. The workers unloaded goods from the ship in the harbor. Have you ever bought or sold any goods? Think about when you go to the grocery store. And I want you, when you tell me when you could have bought or sold any goods, I want you to tell me in a full sentence, and I want you to use the word goods. Go ahead, tell me. So what's the word we've been talking about? Goods. I'm going to list several things. If some of them can be bought, traded, or sold, I want you to say, they are goods. If something cannot be bought, traded, or sold, I want you to say, those are not goods. Freedom. Freedom is not a good, okay? What about clothes? Clothes are goods. What about pineapples? Pineapples are goods. I bought a pineapple the other day. The moon. The moon's not a good. What about love? Love is not a good. What about rings? Rings are goods. All right, remember, goods are things that can be traded, bought, or sold. Thank you so much for learning with me today. We miss you very much. Have a wonderful day. Bye.